Near mint condition, the home of collected editions. And check out that eye, that's exactly what we want to see. Woo, look at that panel, baby. And that, as they say, is that. Hey, all you minties, Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And today, I've got an advanced look at the latest Fantagraphics Lost Marvels. We're looking at Lost Marvels number 2. This is Howard Chaykin, Volume 1, Dominic Fortune, Monark Starstalker, and Phantom Eagle. So let's take a look at this hardcover together. And welcome back, everybody. Before going any further, a big thank you to the folks at Fantagraphics for sending us a copy of this book. This book is due out this week, actually, as a matter of fact, on August 12th or 13th, depending on where you get your books. So, it's a little confusing, the title, where it says Lost Marvels number 2, but then it says Howard Chaykin Volume 1, and I'll explain what that is here in a second. But first, let's take a look at Howard Chaykin's artwork throughout the years. It's so freaking cool, like this picture of Monarch here compared to the Dominic Fortune from the Max series, and then of course Phantom Eagle. But Howard Chaykin Volume 1, the Marvel logo here, collected for the first time. Interesting. And then Marvel logo, Lost Marvels, number 2, Howard Chaykin, Volume 1, and the Fantagraphics logo. To kind of give you an idea, this is what it will look like on the shelf with the very first volume, Lost Marvels number 1, and that is the Towers of Shadows, which I fell in love with. It's one of my favorite releases this year, just because I love anthology horror series. And then I want to compare the backs of the books here. So you have, again, panels, well, this time around from the First Flight of the Phantom Eagle. And then the ISBN down there, Marvel logo, the Fantagraphics logo right there. So Fantagraphics has been able to put out a lot of the older Marvel stuff. We've seen some of the Atlas collections, and then we've seen this particular book, and they're continuing with a 3rd volume. They're calling them Number. I like that. And this one is so unique, though, because we're looking at stories that came out in like 2008, 2009, and one by Garth Ennis. So, yeah, I could not wait to read this. Some of the stuff I have read, and then some of the stuff I've never read before, so I can't wait to talk about it. It does have the art on board, and then, of course, no dust jacket. So, let's actually go ahead and open it up and talk about the stories in here. All right, let's go ahead and open the book up. Here we have the designs, or this pattern of little hearts. Of course, that's from the character of Dominic Fortune, where he wears it on his vest. Dominic Fortune, Monarch Starstalker, Phantom Eagle, Howard Chaykin, Lost Marvels number 2. Now, if you've been reading Marvel Comics for a while, some of these names may be familiar to you, like Dominic Fortune and Monarch Starstalker. And even Phantom Eagle, if you've been reading Marvel Comics since the 70s. And I'll explain a little bit about that here in a second. Lost Marvels number 2, and there's that Max piece right here. So, here we have, with the table of contents, an introduction by Brandon Costello, talking about the importance of Howard Chaykin, and how he saw himself in a way, and I'll explain here in a second what that means. A lot different than the way a lot of artists see themselves. And we have the Marvel Premiere number 32 collected here, as well as the part of the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, and then Marvel Premiere number 58. The only thing I wish they would add to the table of contents are the years these books originally came out. That would be really nice. So you could see just how much of a gap there is between this book right here. And of course, if you know that book, that came out all the way, man, I want to say it was like in the early 80s. If not, had to be in late 70s. Yeah, so let's just say early 80s for sure. And then you have the book over here, which is the Max title that didn't come out until Howard Chaykin came back to the book, to Marvel Comics. And that was in 2009. So it's quite a gap. I mean, we're talking, 1980 to 2009. And then, of course, The War is Hell right here, which is written by Garth Ennis, Howard Chaykin doing the artwork. They don't credit the colorists or the letters. You have to go inside of the book to see who that is. Although they credit the inking over here. By the way, the Terry Austin ink in that Marvel premiere, oh man, it proves something that John Byrne said many years ago. So here's your introduction, and what I meant was the way that Howard Chaykin saw himself is that he is too mainstream of an artist to be an indie artist, and he is too indie of an artist to be a mainstream artist. That's the way he describes himself. I've been a big fan of his since his first comics, American Flag. My buddy Dennis got me hooked on that book. There weren't any trade paperbacks of it. He just had the single issues, and I fell in love with it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. I love this guy. This is the guy that did the Star Wars comics, and sure enough, he did. And then, of course, he left comics to do television work. He worked on The Flash for a while in the 90s, that particular era. So he was kind of done with comics. And that's kind of like what his Black Kiss was. And that's being published by Image Comics. All right. So let's talk about the books in here. So this is Marvel Premiere featuring Monark Starstalker. That name, if you've been reading Marvel Comics, especially the modern cosmic era, oh my gosh, you're like, wait, that character got his start all the way back then? He sure as hell did. So we're looking at this book that came out in like 1976 and, predating Star Wars, especially the Star Wars comics. And this is the reason why he ended up going to Star Wars comics. Yeah. So the character, the bounty hunter of Monarch, who is a Starstalker during the time of War of the Kings, he played a big part in that. And this is where he got his beginning. So it's just a one issue, and oh my gosh, it could have been so much longer. I wish it was a giant size, but it's really cool. It's a cool, suave start to this character. So you've got Monarch and Ulysses, who's like this robotic falcon that kind of works more of almost like Siri, almost like an AI unit. So not just a robotic falcon. And together, they're just bounty hunters. And he has a past, like he tells this young lady his past about being a rigger and how he was abducted and his whole nervous system is wired into the ship that he's piloting. So he's a very interesting character. And again, before Star Wars, and eventually he did go to Star Wars, there's a interesting ad here, and then we get a little bit of the Mark Grunwald Handbook of the Marvel Universe right here. And this is Howard Chaykin, of course, inked by Kerry Gamble. Now, the stuff here at the very beginning, you're going to see a difference, is all done by Howard Chaykin. This is the story and his art. So he's doing his own inks. Of course, Archie Goodwin editing the series. Then we move to Dominic Fortune. So this is a character that, if you look at the handbook, you'll see that he made his first appearance in 1975 in Marvel Preview number 2. That's not collected in here. As a matter of fact, all the Hulk backups, all the stories that feature the character aren't collected here. This is... In the intro, actually, they talk about how those came out in a different size format, so they want to collect everything in a proper size to kind of mimic the size that they originally came out on. So that's cool. I mean, there's promise of more of a collection. This gives you a taste of his style of storytelling and his art in the 1980s. So we're looking at the early 1980s, and we've got characters in here. Again, this is Dominic Fortune, a character that has appeared in Iron Man and Captain America, Silver Sable, Web of Spider-Man. If you have that Web of Spider-Man omnibus, he was in that, the very first one. And he even appeared like in the early aughts too. And he's just a character in the Marvel Universe that never really had his own ongoing series up until that 2009 Max series. Has a lot to deal with S.H.I.E.L.D., of course. Set in the 1930s, by the way. So he's kind of like a super spy, mercenary, adventurer for hire set in the 1930s, which Howard Chaykin is just in love with that particular era. As, he's not the only one. A lot of different writers and artists are in love with that era. But here, you're going to see Dum Dum Dugan, and you're also going to see this character, who honestly was a character that this lady right here, that is Sabath Raven, who honestly is a character that was created for the character of Dominic Fortune. And my gosh, I think she was even in that latest Shield series, the one that is going to be collected in omnibus format. But the basic plot of this is all set in the 30s, where a young Dum-Dum Dugan ends up losing his circus at the Mississippi Queen here. So it's up to the character of Dominic Fortune to help fight and get his circus back from the guy that ended up winning it, because the guy turns out to be a real scumbag. And what's really interesting about the character of Dominic Fortune is that he was based on a character that Howard Chaykin had already created in the pages of Atlas named Scorpion, I'm sorry. Even in the way that he looks, like very suave. And in the intro, you'll see a lot of the type of stories that he's telling through here, very similar to what he was doing with Scorpion. Now, this is, oh my gosh, it's crazy to look at this art, because these are... Actually, they're layouts, right? Like layouts by Howard Chaykin, but finish art by Austin. This face right here, if you're looking at that and you're like, wow, that's a very John Byrne face. There was something that John Byrne said in an interview years ago. He said, if you liked my art, that's what he said. If you liked my X-Men art, you're probably a Terry Austin fan. That's how he said it. Because, I mean, Austin is just one of my favorite inkers, and there's just so much of him in John Byrne's art that sometimes it's hard to separate. Same way that, like, Scott Williams, more of a modern artist, right? Even though his art's... he's been in the field for 40 years, and I say that it's a modern artist. But if you think of Scott Williams and Jim Lee, it's that same style, right? Like, Scott Williams is an actual artist, too. And sometimes it's hard to separate where Jim Lee ends and Scott Williams begins. And I feel that way about John Byrne and Terry Austin. But you're going to see a lot of Austin type of hands in here. A lot of the Austin type of faces through here that you, at one time, you would have thought, wow, that is John Byrne. But what I want you to pay attention to is the way that the stories are laid out. The panels through here. And just how different it is. Yes, there's plenty of cake in this one. It is when Chaykin comes back after working in television and comes back to doing comics for the Max series. So the Max series is completely not for kids. This was an 18 and older series established at Marvel. We've had Punisher Max. I think there was a Deadpool Max, Wolverine Max. More mature content. A lot of it due to the violence, and a lot of it due to the nudity and sexual content too. And there is some of that in here. So Dominic Fortune returns here in this unique era where this is during the Depression, and he is hired by this... it's like a Hollywood starlet. And apparently Howard Chaykin drew a lot of inspiration from actual people, like real people in Hollywood during this time in the 30s. So yes, this one has a complete different feel to it than the earlier adventures that Dominic Fortune was featured in this very book here. This one has more of a adult feel, like I mentioned. And what he is hired to do is protect these three different Hollywood stars. There's three guys. There's like Vaughn and PT and Jock. And they're all kind of drunks and disorderly Hollywood stars. And the reason he got the job is because he was having an affair with one of the directors, his wife. He was having an affair with his wife. So she was a Hollywood starlet that ended up getting him the job. And that's kind of the way that he is. Like, that's kind of the way that he works. Like, he ends up getting the job because he was having an affair with a starlet. So it's a producer, some Hollywood producers who it is that hires him, offers him this pretty easy job just to kind of babysit these guys. And he's willing to pay him $20,000 during the Depression. That is a lot of money. So, of course, Dominic's like, let's do it. And then, of course, it unveils, like, there's a lot going on. Yes, lots of plot twists with horrible people. And then we get War is Hell. Oh, my gosh. Now, War is Hell is something I've never read. I know there was a trade paperback. So I did read the Dominic Fortune stuff, the Max series. That was available in a trade paperback. The War is Hell, for some reason, I could just never find it. And then, honestly, it just kind of became a Lost Marvel, which is the perfect title for this, I guess, right? Like, it makes sense. This is a take on a character, an obscure Marvel character from like the 60s, the Phantom Eagle. It was oh my gosh, who was it? Was it Gary Friedrich, I think, that created the character? I think it was Gary Friedrich in the pages of Marvel Superheroes, but please don't quote me on that. I want to say it was him. And then this is Garth Ennis and Howard Chaykin. By the way, I forgot to say, Delgado does the colors here, Edgar Delgado. And then Jeff Eckelberry doing the lettering for the Dominic Fortune book. So back to this. So this is Garth Ennis and Howard Chaykin working together. A period piece, if you will, that barely features the Phantom Eagle. This is called The First Flight of the Phantom Eagle, and it's a little misguided in the way that it is done, because what this really is the story of Karl Kaufman, who is this American kind of cocky pilot that really wants to go and fight the Germans during World War I. What he does is he forges his papers, and they are cleared so he can take his first flight. So he goes all the way across the seas to go and join the British Air Force. And when his commanding officer finds out that the papers have been forged, he tries to go out there and stop him. Unfortunately for this commanding officer, he gets ripped apart by a propeller, so nobody knows that Carl forged those papers, and he's flying out there. This is a really good and powerful story that kind of shows you how war is hell, right? Completely different than what a lot of people were probably expecting when you say the name Phantom Eagle when you're looking at Marvel. No, this is just barely, loosely based on that character. This starts off like it's a Garth Ennis book, right? This is the guy that did The Boys. He's the guy that did Preacher, but he's a huge fan of war and history and has given us masterpieces. And to me, like, not a lot of people talk about this, and it is freaking phenomenal. So we're looking at the Royal Flying Corps Squadron right here, and an American, like this American guy that's really cocky that just wants to go fight the Germans, infiltrates it. Right? And it's like he's just eager to fight on Uncle Sam's behalf. And through here, you're going to see the horrifics of war and some of the awful things that happen to some of these pilots. And a lot of other things, too, that you probably don't think about. Like some of the diseases that some of these characters end up getting and what takes out some of them. The only thing I will say about this one that I think it's a lot to do with me, is that the epilogue is a little confusing, and that's all I will say. And then there's really nothing in the back. It's just more of the end sheets. Taking a look at that binding, right there, it is sewn binding, 256 pages. And it is printed in this thick matte paper stock. And I find that interesting because I really thought they would change the paper stock when we go from the classic stories right here that were printed in the 70s and then the 80s. And then by the time we get to the Max stuff, we would have the glossy paper stock. Surprised they stuck with the same type of paper stock throughout the book. But you know what? Some people like that consistency in their books. So this is a very unique collection. Definitely adults only due to the sexual content, because Dominic Fortune, it's got to get his. Mixed with some classic stuff from the past that has never been reprinted. And then 2 Max series that had trade paperbacks, but nobody really talks about. And just showing you just how much of an importance Howard Chaykin is in this field of comics. And I remember many years ago, like having discussions with my friends, I've always said that Howard Chaykin and Frank Miller were the 2 like prolific artists that I think of that kind of went 2 different ways. It was like Chaykin took that style that Miller had, and he kind of evolved into something a little rougher around the edge than Miller did. Miller went on to do other projects, of course, and stayed in comics, and then, of course, did his own thing, and then took a lot of chances with changing his style up in Sin City, while Chaykin evolved from something like the beautiful artistic layouts of his panels to something more rough and indie, as he puts it, around the edges. I love that about him. So this book, again, has 256 pages and retails for $49.99. And that, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this book, don't forget to check out our sponsor, cheapgraphicnovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget that CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build of this hardcover. In the comments down below, let me know if you are picking this up, if you're getting all of the Lost Marvels, or you're just a huge fan of Howard Chaykin, so you're only going to get the Howard Chaykin stuff, and what you think of this particular collection. Would you have waited to have all of Dominic Fortune together in one book, or does this feed your appetite for the character of Dominic Fortune? Now, that's it, everybody. If you have any questions, leave them down below. Smash that like button on the way out. Everyone stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.